Alex Acosta was Donald Trump's labor secretary in the first term of Trump's presidency. He happened also to be the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida in 2007, 8, 9, when Jeffrey Epstein was charged with and allowed to plead guilty to very minor charges, relatively, of soliciting a prostitute who was underage and having sex with minors. Basically, using underage people, underage kids as prostitutes and having sex with them. Now, usually that's not considered a trivial crime, but Epstein was allowed to plead guilty by Alex Acosta's office, who then became Trump's labor secretary 10 years later. And it never made sense why. Why? Our country does not go easy on pedophiles, especially ones who use underage people as prostitutes and sex traffics them. You think South Florida is known for going easy on pedophiles? And yet Jeffrey Epstein spent tiny amounts of time in prison, barely any, and in prison he had all the prerogatives, and then he was allowed out to serve the rest of his year at his house. He did community service. Community service, that's what you get if you like speed or you get into an accident that doesn't harm anybody and you're at fault. You gotta get community service. You don't usually get community service when you're caught sex trafficking underage people for prostitution and having sex with them. And yet, Alex Acosta, his office, gave Epstein that plea deal. And obviously when Alex Acosta was proposed as in Trump's cabinet for the first term, people wanted to know, like, hey, what happened there? Now, this is something the Daily Beast reported, and I'm not saying this is well-sourced or reliable, but then the Daily Beast is a very untrustworthy, trashy tabloid, but they don't typically just make things up. All right, here's what it says, quote, Epstein's name, I was told, has been raised by the Trump transition team when Alexander Acosta, the former U.S. attorney in Miami who infamously cut Epstein a non-prosecution plea deal back in 2007, was being interviewed for the job of labor secretary. The plea deal put a hard stop to a separate federal investigation of alleged sex crimes with minors and trafficking. Quote, is the Epstein case going to cause a problem for confirmation hearings? Acosta had been asked. Acosta had explained breezily, apparently, that back in the day, he had just one meeting on the Epstein case, which one meeting. He'd cut the non-prosecution deal with one of Epstein's attorneys because he had, quote, been told to back off, that Epstein was above his pay grade. Quote, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, he told his interviewers in the Trump transition, who evidently thought that was a sufficient answer and went ahead and hired Acosta. I mean, it had to be the case, just stands to reason, that when they were going to put Alex Acosta into Trump's cabinet as Secretary of Labor, which meant he had to go through Senate confirmation, obviously the big, huge red mark on Alex Acosta's record, at least one of them, is that he was the one who gave this insane, bizarre, obviously alarming plea deal to Jeffrey Epstein. And of course, the question was going to be raised, why would you do that? And there are people inside the Trump transition who said that Acosta's answer was, I was told he belongs to Intel and to therefore back off. Now, when Acosta was asked publicly about this by a journalist later, he denied that he had said that. Which leaves the question still of, well, then why would he give Jeffrey Epstein this kind of plea deal? But the fact that it was reported that there are people inside the Trump transition who said that that was his answer, now again, I'm not saying any of this is proof, but it's absolutely evidence that entitles not only you to ask the question, but obligates the government to answer, and yet they won't. There's other evidence linking Jeffrey Epstein to the Israeli government and Israeli intelligence, and we should take a look at that, so let's do that. Well, you note how well documented, well sourced all of this is. This is not, message boards or Facebook posts that I'm finding arbitrarily. These are well-known, well-documented facts about all the people involved. Ghislaine Maxwell is the only person to actually spend time in prison for what Jeffrey Epstein did. She's accused of being his primary associate, the person who found the girls who he sex trafficked. She was accused of having sex trafficked huge numbers of underage girls for him. She pled guilty. She didn't have to go through, there was no real disclosures as part of her trial. And she's now sitting in a federal prison. Ghislaine Maxwell came from a very, very wealthy family. In fact, her father was a billionaire. His name was Robert Maxwell. And he changed his name. Even though his name is Robert Maxwell, he's a British citizen. Robert Maxwell is Jewish. And he was a fanatical supporter of Israel. In fact, when he died, it was under very mysterious circumstances. He was on his yacht, and he somehow disappeared just off his yacht. Just died, disappeared off his yacht. No one saw. And when he died, it was a week after Seymour Hersh had reported that he worked with the Mossad. And then other journalists reported that as well. And Robert Maxwell at first denied it. He sued Seymour Hersh for reporting that he was a Mossad agent. But he had been so integral into the Israeli government that, as the Washington Post reported in 1991, when he died, Israel gives Robert Maxwell a farewell fit for a hero. This is Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Quote, publisher Robert Maxwell today was given a funeral befitting a national hero by Israel, the country with which he developed an intimate and sometimes controversial relationship in the last 3 years of his life. Maxwell, whose body was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean off the Canary Islands last Tuesday after he disappeared from his yacht. Whoops. We all disappear from our yacht sometimes, not a big deal. He was buried late this afternoon in Judaism's most prestigious spot, the cemetery on Jerusalem's Mount of Olives facing the Western Wall. His funeral service in Jerusalem's Hall of the People was attended by a host of Israeli politicians led by Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir and President Chaim Herzog, who eulogized the self-made tycoon as, quote, a man cast in a heroic mold. Only a week before his death, the volatile owner of the New York Daily News and Britain's Mirror newspaper group became involved in an exchange of lawsuits with author Seymour Hersh, the multiple Pulitzer Prize winner who broke the story of the massacre in Vietnam, as well as Abu Ghraib, one of the most accomplished, celebrated journalists on the planet. He reported that he was a Mossad agent that led to an exchange of lawsuits. And he had, quote, accused Maxwell of working with Israel's Mossad intelligence agency. Nobody was better sourced inside American intel, or is still, than Seymour Hersh. Quote, Maxwell's death at sea only intensified the speculation in London, where Hersh promised to produce further revelations of the 68-year-old publisher's clandestine Israeli connections. Here's how that lawsuit terminated. New York Times, August 1994. U.S. author, meaning Seymour Hersh, gets an apology in the libel case. Quote, the out-of-court settlement announced in the High Court in London also ended a countersuit brought by the author Seymour Hersh and the publisher Faber and Faber Limited. The Maxwell lawsuit was prompted by Mr. Hersh's 1991 book, The Samson Option, about Israel's nuclear weapons program. In yesterday's proceeding, a lawyer for the Mirror Group, which was controlled by Mr. Maxwell before his death in November 1991, said it acknowledged that Mr. Hersh, quote, is an author of excellent reputation of the highest integrity who would never write anything which he did not believe to be true, and that he was in this instance fully justified in writing what he did. Fully justified was the admission by Robert Maxwell's publishing company and his estate about Seymour Hersh's well-documented, well-sourced claim that Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, was a billionaire who worked for Israeli intelligence. Now, the fact that he was working for the Mossad, and that just so happened to be the father of Jeffrey Epstein's principal accomplice, I don't know, seems like at least evidence worth asking to me. Aside from the fact that he was given basically a state funeral in Israel, and the president, prime minister, and every Israeli prominent official came to the funeral and heaped praises on him, you think he might have done something for the Mossad and for the Israeli government? Another issue that has always been mysterious and crucial to understanding the Epstein case is the source of his wealth. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just rich. He had the life of only a multi-billionaire can lead multiple private planes. I don't mean like 4-seat Cessnas. I mean like 747 jets. He had the largest residential property in all of Manhattan, where the richest people in the world live. He had the biggest house, the biggest living space. That massive he had a private island in the Caribbean, a gigantic sprawling mansion in West Palm Beach, a massive estate and ranch in New Mexico. Where did that come from? He didn't work for a bank. He didn't work for a hedge fund. One of the main sources of wealth was from someone named Les Wexner, who's a multi-billionaire, who was the founder of Victoria's Secrets, the lingerie company. Became extremely wealthy, multi-billionaire. He's still alive. He's in his late 80s. And apparently the claim is, and Les Wexner got sued and got kicked off boards because of this, but people are like, why did you shovel so much money to Jeffrey Epstein? And he said, he was really good. He gave me some advice that saved money on taxes. Really? So you gave him, what, $2 billion, $3 billion for that? Because he was like, as Tucker Carlson said when I was with him 6 weeks ago when we were talking about this, he said, yeah, he was basically a good tax accountant. You don't think tax accountants generally get $2 to $3 billion? So Les Wexner is completely tied to the Israeli government. In fact, other than making money, Les Wexner has no purpose in this life other than to serve the Israeli government and its interests. His Wexner Foundation, which is his nonprofit foundation, here they have on their own page, you see the Wexner Foundation, Our Story. Since the early 1980s, the Wexner Foundation has been a pioneer in the field of Jewish private philanthropy. For 35 years, the Wexner Foundation has never wavered from its focus upon Jewish leadership in the Jewish world and Israel. The foundation's professionalism, standards of excellence, and strong relationship with Jewish communities and organizations have created a model of practice for Jewish private philanthropy that has stood the test of time. So Jeffrey Epstein's main accomplice is the daughter of a Mossad agent, and his main benefactor is somebody who devoted his life to Israel. Here in Vanity Fair in 2021, while Biden was president, so these are pretty liberal magazine, and yet while Biden was president, they published The Mogul and the Monster inside Jeffrey Epstein's decades-long relationship with his biggest client, meaning Les Wexner. Of the mysteries that still surround the life and crimes of the notorious financier, the source of his wealth and thus his power might be the greatest mystery. His long-standing business ties with his most prominent client, billionaire retail magnate Les Wexner, hold the key. Quote, during the 1990s, both Epstein and Wexner's profile grew on the world stage. In 1991, Wexner co-founded a philanthropic organization of Jewish billionaires known as the Mega Group, which uses some of its vast resources to shape Middle East policy. Oh, you don't say. American Jewish billionaires use their vast wealth to shape Middle East policy? Who knew? But Les Wexner devoted his life to that. Jeffrey Epstein's primary benefactor. Quote, in 2003, Wexner's foundation commissioned GOP messaging guru Frank Luntz to advise American Jewish leaders on how to rally support for Israel. Quote, for a solid year, you should be invoking the name of Saddam Hussein and how Israel was always behind America's efforts to rid the world of this ruthless dictator and liberate their people, Luntz's recommendation stated. So if you are now to say that, hey, you know what, I think Israel was behind the war in Iraq, and recall that Benjamin Netanyahu came and testified before the U.S. Congress in 2002 to urge the invasion of Iraq and the toppling of Saddam, promising that he had nuclear weapons, that if you toppled Saddam Hussein, peace and prosperity, and we were going to flourish in the Middle East, none of which, of course, turned out to be true. People say, you're anti-Semitic. In 2003, the Wexner Foundation hired Frank Luntz, and Frank Luntz said the key to keeping Israel popular in the U.S. is to spend a solid year, invoking the name of Saddam Hussein and how Israel was always behind American efforts to rid the world of this ruthless dictator and liberate their people, the recommendation said. Now you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to say that Israel was behind the invasion of Iraq and the war in Iraq. But back then, they thought it was a huge success, and Frank Luntz was telling Les Wexner to keep Americans loving Israel, constantly remind them that it was Israel who got you to invade Iraq. The article goes on, quote, Epstein kept close in that circle of influence. UN Ambassador Bill Richardson and Middle East envoy George Mitchell allegedly participated in Epstein's sex ring. That was according to a lawsuit filed by Virginia Giuffre. Now, she turned out to be less than truthful, to put it mildly, so they both, Richardson and Mitchell, adamantly denied the allegations. So I wouldn't put much stock in that. But for sure, this is true, and we'll show you the evidence in just a second. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak was an Epstein confidant. Epstein invested $1 million in one of Barak's business ventures. Barak reportedly visited the E66 condo building. Dershowitz told me, Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, that he once arrived at Epstein's townhouse as Epstein and Barak, the former Israeli prime minister, were wrapping up lunch. On a chalkboard, Barak had drawn a map of how the West Bank should be divided. Barak could not be reached for comment. In 2019, he denied any wrongdoing related to the condo visits. Now, this gigantic, sprawling townhouse that Jeffrey Epstein had in the middle of Manhattan on the Upper East Side, people are like, how did you get that? It's like almost $100 million. Business Insider in 2019 has an article, here's how Jeffrey Epstein may have acquired a $77 million Upper East Side townhouse for $0. Sounds like a pretty good bargain. Hey, here's the largest residential space in all of Manhattan. You have billionaires. This is bigger than all of them. Years back, it was valued at $77 million. You can get it for $0. Did you ever say, yeah, I think I'd like that? Here's what the article says. In total, Epstein's real estate holdings are estimated to be valued at north of $100 million. At the center of the investigation is Epstein's Upper East Side townhouse, which is one of the largest private homes in Manhattan, actually the largest private home. The townhouse was bought in 1989 by founder and CEO of L Brands, Les Wexner, for $13.2 million. Wexner then sold it in 1998 to the New York-based 9 East 71st Street Corporation for an undisclosed amount. Public records from 2011 show that Epstein held, to some degree, ownership of NES, which is where Wexner sold this massive townhouse. Details of the relationship with the company are still unclear. Public records show that in 2011, the ownership of the property was transferred from NES to the Virgin Islands-based company Maple Inc., another company also controlled by Epstein. Documents indicate the property was transferred to Maple for $0. Now, one of the people who most vocally accused former Israeli President Ehud Barak of having very sinister and multifaceted ties to Jeffrey Epstein is the current Israeli President, Benjamin Netanyahu. Here from the Times of Israel, July 2019, quote, Netanyahu goes after Barak for ties to accused billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, President Netanyahu highlights the payment to political rival from the Wexner Foundation, linked to the U.S. tycoon who allegedly sex trafficked minors. The video was published under the headline, What else has sex offender Epstein given to Barak? According to Netanyahu's video, Epstein manages the Wexner Foundation. Forbes said he serves as a trustee and a spokesperson for the institution that the financial news outlet that Lex Wexner, founder of the organization, severed ties with Epstein over a decade ago. From Haaretz in July 19th, revealed Jeffrey Epstein entered a partnership worth millions with former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak in 2015. Quote, in 2015, Barak set up a limited partnership in which he is the sole shareholder. That company invested in Reparty Homeland Security, established in 2014, becoming a major shareholder. Last year, Reparty changed its name to Carbine. The company develops call handling and identification capabilities for emergency response services. Barak is the chairman of Carbine, and according to reports by business media outlets, his personal investment in the company totals millions of dollars in it. Haaretz has learned that Epstein financed a considerable part of the investment, thus becoming a partner in the project. One of the company's directors is Pinchas Bukris, the Director General of the Defense Ministry during Barak's tenure as Defense Minister. Bukris encouraged the former Prime Minister to invest in the company. Last year, Israeli journalist Errol Siegel reported that in 2004, the Wexner Foundation, Jeffrey Epstein's primary benefactor, gave Barak $2.3 million for research he conducted. Barak refused to comment on the research and said, quote, as a private citizen, I deal with research and business entrepreneurship. My services are in demand, and there are bodies prepared to pay me large sums for them. I bet there are. As the investigation went on, it turns out that Ehud Barak wasn't just a close friend of Jeffrey Epstein. He wasn't just someone in whom Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein invested millions and millions of dollars. Remember, this is the former Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel. But he was also one of Epstein's closest friends. From the Times of Israel, May of 2023, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak met with Jeffrey Epstein dozens of times and flew on his private plane, report. According to the Wall Street Journal's Wednesday report on the calendar's contents, Ehud Barak visited Epstein about 30 times between 2013 and 2017 at his estates in Florida and New York. including a time in 2014 when the former Israeli premier flew with Epstein on his private aircraft from Palm Beach to Tampa, after which Epstein went on to New York. Barak said his wife and an Israeli security guard were also on that flight. He said he flew with Epstein on his private planes on one other occasion, also with his wife and guards. According to the report, Barak also met with Epstein mostly for nearly a year, beginning December 2015. The meetings came well after Epstein's 2008-2009 conviction and sentencing for procuring a child for prostitution. Barak has maintained he had no knowledge of Epstein's activities. You think the Prime Minister of Israel, the former Prime Minister of Israel, involved in tens of millions of dollars with this person? Flying on his plane, staying at his house, being his best friend? You think he does that without having a basic Google search of that person? To find out that he was convicted of sex? No, I had no idea. Even though it was totally public, no one told me. Epstein's calendar also featured other meetings with Barak, such as one that also included an executive at the consulting firm of former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. The former premier said he first met Epstein in 2003 at an event attended by American dignitaries. Through the late Israeli president and statesman Shimon Peres. The two arranged to meet at a later time in New York. Quote, I came to his house quite a few times with my wife, Barak claimed, adding that he had met many, quote, interesting people at Epstein's homes. So, just to summarize for the moment, Jeffrey Epstein's main accomplice, who's now in prison, is the daughter of a billionaire Mossad agent. Jeffrey Epstein's primary benefactor, as Lex Wexner, has countless, infinite ties to the entire Israeli government, all Israeli defense officials, all Israeli prime ministers. And one of Epstein's closest friends, in whom he was investing along with Lex Wexner, millions and millions of dollars, is the former defense minister and prime minister of Israel. Do you think these are enough ties to expect an answer from the government about whether he was working for a foreign government or with a foreign government? Or, as Dan Bongino said, maybe they were able to get access to him and to his things without even his knowledge. Maybe they were able to spy on him using their extreme... as you might remember, Jeff Bezos had a big scandal when he was married, and a bunch of his DMs leaked to Laura Sanchez, including naked pictures of himself and all kinds of expressions of sexually explicit content. And it was almost certainly the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, who was behind that hack using Israeli surveillance technology such as Pegasus that can hack into WhatsApp, even though it's end-to-end encryption. And of course, Bill Gates ended up divorced because it was revealed that he was cavorting with Jeffrey Epstein, even after his wife had, for some reason, we still don't know, insisted he not meet with Jeffrey Epstein. He kept meeting with him. So you don't think Israelis are looking for this kind of stuff, interested in it, even without necessarily Jeffrey Epstein, as Naftali Bennett denied, working for the Mossad? I would suggest it's very naive. One of the questions that seems to have been answered was when Jeffrey Epstein was first charged in Florida in 2007, 2008 with sex trafficking minors for prostitution. He disappeared, and a lot of people believed he had went to Israel, planning to seek refuge there from these pedophile charges. And the Times of Israel in July of 2019 reported this: Epstein's lawyers claimed that a fake passport of Epstein's was needed to hide his Jewishness. So it turned out he had a fake passport. Who among us doesn't have a fake passport? Quote, the attorneys for U.S. financier Jeffrey Epstein, who is also accused of sex trafficking, said Thursday that he had a fake passport in order to hide his Jewish identity and avoid being kidnapped when traveling internationally, while stressing that he had not used it to leave the country. Assistant U.S. Attorney Alex Rossmiller of the prosecution said the government learned earlier this week that a raid of Epstein's mansion following his July 6th arrest turned up, quote, piles of cash, dozens of diamonds, and a passport with the name of the defendant but a name other than his and a locked safe. A fake passport. Prior to Thursday's bail hearing, defense lawyers told the judge that Epstein was given the passport by a friend after some Jewish Americans were informally advised to carry identification bearing a non-Jewish name while traveling internationally during a period when hijackings were more common. You know, I've traveled internationally quite a bit, including through the Middle East and Muslim majority countries and the like. No one ever told me, hey, you should get a passport with a non-Jewish name. Our friend Sagar Enjeti, who's an excellent journalist, noted this yesterday. In early 2008, it was open talk in New York society that Epstein moved all his assets and fled to Israel to escape those charges. From there, in Israel, he negotiated his sweetheart plea deal, which allowed him to come back and escape real justice. This is from Vanity Fair in 2008, while this prosecution was pending. Talk that Jeffrey Epstein has moved himself and his assets to Israel reached the ears of such luminaries as Harvey Weinstein, Jeff Books, Alex Gibney, Taylor Hackford, Steve Kroft, Dustin Hoffman, Alec Baldwin, and filmmaker Michael Mellor. Quote, has anyone told Vicky Ward? I heard someone behind me say, fame. Ever since I read an article about Epstein in the March 2003 issue of Vanity Fair, Vanity Fair, I have had the dubious honor of being considered New York's expert on the case. Well, I've never been one to leave a riddle unsolved, so I called Epstein's office this morning to ask. Around lunchtime, he phoned me and laughing assured me he'd been in Israel, but was now back in New York. Quote, would you want to live in Israel, he said? And then here's from WPTV, a local affiliate in Florida, quote, April 2008, Epstein returns from Israel before pleading guilty. Some question why he was allowed to keep his passport. So he went to Israel, Jeffrey Epstein did, when these charges were first brought against him. He used a fake passport to go there. And from Israel, he negotiated his sweetheart deal. That's the only reason he came back. Now, it's very possible that he would never have come back. He would have just stayed in Israel, which is weird because how do you stay in Israel when you have pedophile charges against you pending unless you have good contacts with the Israeli government? It would seem like the American government could extradite you, but because Israel has basically a right of return for any Jewish person to go to Israel, CBS News, this is not Nick Fuentes, is not whatever. This is CBS News, reported in February of 2020. This is the title of the article from CBS News. How Jewish American pedophiles hide from justice in Israel. So Jewish American pedophiles like Jeffrey Epstein go to Israel and hide there from justice when they get caught engaging in pedophilia in the United States, and Israel protects them. Quote, a CBS News investigation, I can't stress enough, this is CBS News. Investigation has found that many accused American pedophiles flee to Israel. And bringing them to justice can be difficult. Jewish Community Watch, an American organization that tracks accused pedophiles, has been trying for years to find Caro and help him bring justice. That's an American Jewish pedophile. Since the small organization started tracking accused pedophiles in 2014, it says that more than 60 have fled from the U.S. to Israel. Given its limited resources to identify these individuals, JCW says the actual number is likely much larger. Israel, known as a nation on the cutting edge of technology, but Shauna says that doesn't trickle down to local law enforcement. Shauna says police don't request background checks of perpetrators arrested in Israel who have recently moved there from other countries. They don't even do a Google search, she says. The U.S. Department of Justice declined to comment on specific cases too, but praised their relationship with Israel's law enforcement, adding sex offenders in the past have been successfully extradited. Now, again, if somebody asked me, like, is this proof that Jeffrey Epstein worked with the Israeli government or for it? I would say proof. No, proof means evidence that leaves no doubt that something's true. Evidence is weaker. Evidence is facts that bolster a conclusion but don't necessarily compel that conclusion, meaning it could be something else. So if there's a murder and I know that person X got in a huge fight that morning with that person and threatened to kill them and then went to the store and bought a knife and some duct tape and was in the vicinity of that house and then was seen leaving the house with that big bag, all of that is evidence that the person murdered the victim, but it's not proof. Proof would be, oh, the house had videotape, a hidden camera, and it caught the murder on the videotape, and you can clearly see the defendant's face on the videotape. And even there, you could say it was adulterated or forged or whatever, but in general, proof is of that kind of evidence, conclusive evidence. None of this is conclusive in the sense that it has to be the case that Jeffrey Epstein had ties to, but it's certainly pretty ample, pretty abundant pretty concrete. At least enough to demand that not the Israeli government, but our government tell us what the answer to that question is that they refuse to ask, and to not just answer it, but show us the evidence. You can't prove a negative. But for sure the government has information about Jeffrey Epstein and his ties to Israeli intelligence or the Israeli government. It's impossible that they don't. And we should get to see it and hear what Pam Bondi's answer is, what J.D. Vance's answer, what's Donald Trump's answer, what's Kash Patel's answer. Their own deputy director was raising this question. No one can say it's irrelevant. And when you compile the evidence, there's certainly good reason to believe that if it's not proven true, it's certainly something that any rational person would have very strong suspicions about and deserve answers to. You've heard the hype. I know you have. If you want to pretend you haven't, I'm not going to believe you. I know you've heard the hype. Maybe you've seen the new launches sell out. But if you still haven't tried 1775 coffee yet, this is your shot because they've just launched their 1775 starter kit. And the first drop is limited to just 1,000 units, not 100, 1,000. Still, that's not a lot. This starter kit isn't some dinky sampler pack. It's a full-on pack of caffeine freedom. A bold, dark roast that hits harder than a CNN fact check. A smooth, medium roast for strength without bitterness, and vitality mushroom coffee for clean energy, laser focus, and zero crash. It's all single origin, small batch, mold-free, and toxin-free. Plus, you're also getting, in addition to that coffee, a gold spoon clip, because Freedom isn't scooped with plastic. A lot of these starter kits come with plastic scoopers. It's disgusting. You're not going to scoop Freedom with plastic, only with gold. And this is a gold spoon clip. A frother strong enough to stir up your coffee and your mother-in-law's political opinions. That's how strong that frother is. And a black 1775 tumbler that says, I don't take life advice or caffeine from a woke sea witch. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear that's yours for just $99. This is for the ones who have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wondering if it's actually worth it. Spoiler, it's worth it. Go to 1775coffee.com/Glenn and grab your starter kit before they're gone. Bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something just like Rumble does. Start your day with coffee that actually backs what you believe in. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.